Mary Pickering Tuplin was born on May 5, 1870, to Johnny and Margaret Tuplin, the parents of 10 children. William Millman, born in 1868, was the eldest of 6 children, of John and Joanna Millman. The two first crossed paths at a New Year's Eve party on December 31, 1886. After the celebration, which ended around 3 a.m., William reportedly walked Mary home. Sometime later, Mary confided in one of her sisters that she was pregnant and named William as the father. As her pregnancy became evident, rumors about her and William's relationship began circulating within their close-knit Irish-Scottish community. Upon hearing the rumors, William arranged to meet Mary on Sunday, June 26th. That same evening, Mary's younger brother John was gravely ill and passed away early the next morning. His funeral was held on Tuesday, June 28th. Mary, staying home to care for her sister's baby, did not attend the service. After her family returned from the funeral, Mary left the house without saying a word. Clad in a light cotton dress, stockings, and boots, she stepped into the evening twilight. It was the last time her parents would see her alive. Worried about Mary's disappearance, her father began searching for her that night. He stopped at a neighbor's house and called for her in the darkness, but she was nowhere to be found. The following day, he crossed the river to the Millman home to speak with William's parents. He also visited an attorney to inquire about filing a warrant for William's arrest. As word of Mary's disappearance spread, a search party of over a dozen men was organized by Friday. 2 significant clues pointed to the Southwest River. Mary's handkerchief was found near the riverbank, and a boat moored near the Millman property was missing its large stone anchor. Using a grappling hook, the searchers dragged the river. On Monday, July 4th, they discovered Mary's body submerged in 4 to 5 feet of water near a spring, weighted down by the missing stone tied around her waist. 3 physicians examined Mary's body and determined she had been shot twice in the head. They also confirmed she was 6 months pregnant. Upon learning of the discovery, William traveled to Charlottetown that same day to consult an attorney regarding Mary's father's accusations. Meanwhile, an investigation into Mary's death began, and on July 7th, William was arrested. During William's arraignment, his father, John Millman, tried to provide an alibi for him, insisting he could not have committed such a horrific act. While testifying that he was with William around the time of the murder, John fainted in court. Upon recovering, he admitted that he and his wife had actually been attending a church meeting the night Mary disappeared. William was subsequently sent to the county jail in Charlottetown to await trial. William Millman's Supreme Court trial for the murder of Mary Tuplin began on January 24, 1888, with Associate Justice Joseph J. Hensley presiding. Chief Justice Edward Palmer and Associate Justice James Horsfield Peters were also present. After the jury selection, Attorney General Frederick Peters presented the Crown's case, framing it around 2 questions. Was Mary Tuplin murdered? And if so, who was responsible? Peters asserted the first question was indisputable and pledged to prove that William Millman was the perpetrator. Over the course of the 11-day trial, which drew large crowds, the Crown called 48 witnesses. Much of the evidence was uncontested. The medical examiner confirmed Mary had been killed by a gunshot to the brain, with 2 bullets recovered, one flattened against her skull and another that penetrated fatally. A friend of Williams testified that the defendant had borrowed a .32 caliber revolver without bullets a week before the murder and returned it 2 days after Mary's body was found, with 3 live rounds and 2 spent shells in the chambers. Additional testimony came from a 13-year-old girl who claimed she saw William crossing the river in a small boat the night Mary disappeared. The boat's owner stated that the 80-pound rock used to weigh Mary's body down had been stored in his boat as an anchor. Despite the compelling evidence, all of it was circumstantial, leaving room for doubt. Witnesses reported seeing a stranger in dark clothing near the river before sundown, but only one person identified him as William. Others recalled a wagon traveling at high speed that night, carrying 2 men and a girl, none of whom could be identified. Timelines were also inconsistent, with witnesses offering conflicting accounts about key events, such as Mary's disappearance, a church meeting, and 2 gunshots heard near the river. When the defense began its case, William's attorney E.J. Hodgson called 18 witnesses, significantly fewer than the prosecution. Some of the most damaging testimony came from William's family. His mother, Joanna Millman, testified that when she returned from a church meeting after 10 p.m., William was not home. Shortly after, she saw him in the kitchen dressed in dark clothes. William's sister, Mary Eliza, testified that he had told her earlier that evening he was going to the river to bathe while their parents were at church. In his closing argument, Hodgson stressed the importance of reasonable doubt, arguing that even strong suspicions were insufficient for a conviction. In response, Attorney General Peters emphasized that while guilt must be proven, doubts must be reasonable, not impossible. Peters also pointed out that Williams was the only person with a clear motive to kill Mary. The next day, February 4th, Justice Henley delivered a detailed 4-hour review of the evidence, which offered little support for Williams' innocence, further strengthening the prosecution's case. At 4 p.m., after concluding his summary, Justice Henley sent the jury to deliberate. 5 hours later, the jurors returned with their verdict. When the foreman announced William Millman was guilty, the defendant fainted and had to be carried out of the courtroom unconscious. A few days later, on February 9th, a large crowd gathered again at the Charlottetown courthouse to hear Millman's sentence. Justice Henley dismissed the jury's recommendation for leniency, stating that Millman had shown no mercy for his young victim, who had done him no harm. The judge sentenced Millman to death, declaring, "You shall be kept in custody until Tuesday, the 10th day of the month of April, and on that day, between the hours of 8 o'clock in the forenoon and 4 o'clock in the afternoon, within the walls of said prison, you be hanged by the neck until you are dead." Millman was returned to his cell, where he attempted to escape in late March. He struck a guard over the head with a bottle, but failed to find a way out of the jail yard. Captured and subdued, he was placed in shackles and kept under strict watch until the day of his execution. On April 10th, a small audience of 50 people was admitted to the prison yard to witness the hanging. Millman, seeking to avoid the sight of the gallows, requested to be blindfolded. After the sheriff read the death warrant, his legs were bound, final prayers were offered, and the noose was placed around his neck. At 8:08 a.m., the trapdoor was released. Though doctors recorded faint pulse activity for 10 minutes, William Millman was officially pronounced dead at 8:19 a.m. This execution marked the last hanging on Prince Edward Island in the 19th century. It would be another 53 years before the island's final executions. A double hanging in Charlottetown occurred in 1941. On December 10, 1909, a brutal crime unfolded in a Savannah home, leaving 3 women as victims. Eliza Gribble, 70, and her daughter, Carrie Olander, 36, were found dead, while a third woman, Maggie Hunter, was discovered severely injured but later succumbed to her injuries in the hospital. Police found Carrie Olander's body in the hallway, where they determined she had been sexually assaulted before her throat was slit. Eliza Gribble, the owner of the house, was found in the back bedroom, seated in an easy chair. A newspaper and her reading glasses lay at her feet, and her skull bore the imprint of an axe. Eliza had moved to Savannah from Cornwall, England, before the Civil War and had lived in the house with her daughter. Carrie Olander, partially deaf and separated from her husband, Andrew J. Olander, had recently relocated to Savannah to live with her mother. Investigators believe that she was the first to be attacked, likely while trying to protect Eliza. Maggie Hunter, 34, had moved into the Gribble house just 1 day before the attacks. Recently estranged from her husband, J.C. Hunter, 30 years her senior, Maggie planned to support herself by working as a seamstress. J.C. Hunter had delivered a sewing machine to the house the day before the murders. Maggie was discovered near the front door of the house, gravely injured with her throat slit and her head severely beaten. Despite being rushed to the hospital, she succumbed to her injuries 3 days later. The crime occurred early enough in the day to make the evening edition of the Savannah Evening Press, sparking widespread panic in the town. Frenzied town people rioted, tearing down fences and breaking into homes in a desperate search for the perpetrator. The story quickly gained national attention, with the Los Angeles Herald reporting on December 11, 1909, that 150 black folk are prisoners in the police station awaiting examination. Mobs stormed the jail in outrage, leaving the detained men in fear for their lives. While in a delirious state at the hospital, the dying Maggie Hunter named her attacker to Reverend John S. Wilder, a Baptist minister, at her bedside. She accused her estranged husband, J.C. Hunter, of the crime. Following her claim, police searched Hunter's home where they found a bloody rag and blood-stained clothes. He was promptly taken into custody. On February 23, 1910, a Chatham County grand jury indicted J.C. Hunter, Willie Walls, and John Coker for the murders of the three women. All three men denied any involvement. On August 17, 1910, Hunter was convicted of murder and sentenced to death by hanging. Despite his appeals, his conviction and sentence were upheld, and his execution was scheduled for December 22, 1911. The day before his execution, Reverend Wilder was to baptize Hunter in his jail cell. Although Hunter continued to profess his innocence, he received news that his sentence had been commuted to life in prison. After serving over a decade, Hunter was pardoned by Governor Clifford Walker on October 27, 1923, and returned to Savannah. J.C. Hunter, born David L. Taylor, was Maggie Hunter's estranged husband. At the time of the murders, Maggie lived at the Gribble House, while Hunter resided nearby at Montgomery and Congress Streets. A Civil War veteran, he served in the 63rd Regiment Georgia Volunteer Infantry until being wounded during the Battle of Atlanta. After the war, Hunter served jail time for horse theft and bigamy. Upon his release, he changed his name to Hunter. A paper hanger and painter from Guyton, Georgia, Hunter was 30 years older than Maggie and often referred to her as his daughter. While dying in the hospital, Maggie, in a delirious state, identified Hunter as her attacker to Reverend John S. Wilder. Police searched Hunter's residence and discovered incriminating evidence, including a bloody rag hidden in his fireplace, blood-stained clothing, and a walking cane identified by Savannah lawyer Robert J. Travis. Hunter was the only person fully tried for the murders. On August 17, 1910, he was convicted and sentenced to death by hanging. However, on December 22, 1911, his sentence was commuted to life in prison. Willie Walls also came under suspicion after admitting to police that he had attempted to visit Maggie on the day of the murders. Walls had paid Maggie's rent at the Gribble House for a month, as she was estranged from Hunter. Although Walls was questioned and briefly held, the lack of evidence led to his release without trial. Another suspect, Bingham Bryan, was arrested on January 25, 1910, under suspicion of robbery. It was rumored that Eliza Gribble had an old trunk containing valuable documents, and Bryan, the property's yardman, was believed to know its contents. Despite being held, Bryan was never brought to trial due to insufficient evidence. John Coker was also charged and brought to trial, but was released before jury deliberations due to unreliable witnesses and a lack of evidence linking him to the crime. Bridget Cleary was born on February 19, 1869, in Ballyvodlia, County Tipperary, Ireland. On August 6, 1887, she married Michael Cleary in a Roman Catholic church in Drangan. The two had met earlier that month in Clonmel, where Michael worked as a cooper and Bridget was apprenticed as a dressmaker. Despite being married for 8 years, the couple had no children by the time of Bridget's death. Following their wedding, Bridget returned to her hometown of Ballyvodlia to live with her parents, while Michael remained in Clonmel to continue his work as a cooper. During this time, Bridget became increasingly independent, raising her own flock of chickens and selling eggs to neighbors. Unusually for women in her era and community, she pursued a professional career. With a state-of-the-art Singer sewing machine, she worked as a dressmaker and milliner. After the death of Bridget's mother, the couple took on the responsibility of caring for her elderly father, Patrick Boland. This arrangement allowed them to qualify for a laborer's cottage, a privilege they otherwise wouldn't have been entitled to. The cottage, one of the best in the village, was built on the site of a rumored fairy ring fort, a detail that likely contributed to the lack of competition for the property. In March of 1895, Bridget Cleary was reported missing under mysterious circumstances. She had been unwell for several days, reportedly suffering from bronchitis. On March 13, 1895, a doctor visited her at home, assessing her condition as severe enough to warrant a visit from a priest to administer the last rites. Over the next 2 days, friends and family gathered at her home, attempting various treatments, including traditional remedies. One alarming ritual suggested the escalating tension. Bridget's father and husband accused her of being a fairy changeling, sent to replace the real Bridget. By March 16th, rumors spread that Bridget was missing, prompting local police to begin their search. Michael Cleary, her husband, claimed that fairies had taken his wife and seemed to be holding a vigil for her return. Witnesses were interviewed over the following week, and on March 22nd, Bridget's charred body was discovered in a shallow grave. Her death shocked the community, and 9 individuals, including Michael, were charged in connection with her disappearance. A coroner's inquest held the next day concluded that Bridget had died from burning. The legal hearings for Bridget Cleary's case took place from April 1st to 6th, 1895. A 10th person was charged during this period, and one of the original 9 defendants was discharged, leaving 9 individuals bound over for trial. The trial session began on July 3rd, and the grand jury indicted 5 of the defendants for murder: Michael Cleary, Patrick Boland, Mary Kennedy, James Kennedy, and Patrick Kennedy. All 9 were also indicted on charges of wounding. The case moved forward to trial. The evidence revealed that on March 15th, Michael Cleary summoned Father Ryan to their home. The priest found Bridget alive, but in an agitated state. Michael admitted to Father Ryan that he had not been giving his wife the medicine prescribed by the doctor, stating he lacked faith in it. He reportedly said, "People may have some remedies of their own that might do more good than doctor's medicine," or something to that effect. Father Ryan gave Bridget communion before leaving. Later that night, Bridget's relatives and neighbors returned to the Cleary household, where another heated argument occurred, once again involving fairy mythology. At one point, Bridget allegedly told Michael that the only person who had been taken by fairies was his mother. Michael then violently attempted to force-feed Bridget, throwing her to the ground in front of the kitchen fireplace and threatening her with a burning piece of wood. Bridget's chemise caught fire, and Michael poured lamp oil on her. Witnesses were uncertain whether she had already died at this point. Michael prevented others from helping her, claiming she was a changeling who had been so for a week, and that he would retrieve his real wife from the fairies. During the trial, the jury was taken to the storage building where Bridget's body was kept before burial, allowing them to view her condition and the extent of her injuries. They also verified her identity by looking at her face, which strongly impacted their perception of the brutal suffering Bridget had endured. Charges against one co-defendant, William Ahern, were dropped. 3 others, John Dunn, Michael Kennedy, and William Kennedy, were convicted of wounding. Patrick Kennedy was sentenced to 5 years of penal servitude. Michael Kennedy, James Kennedy, and William Kennedy each received 18 months of hard labor. Mary Kennedy was released due to her age and frailty. Patrick Boland was sentenced to 6 months of hard labor, and John Dunn was sentenced to 3 years of penal servitude. Michael Cleary was found guilty of manslaughter and sentenced to 20 years of penal servitude. He served 15 years in prison before being released from Maryborough Prison on April 28, 1910.